I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. While every non-alcoholic brand is shouting dry January, Recess is telling you to quit, literally. Joining us is Ben Witte, CEO and co-founder of the #1 mocktail brand, Recess, to unpack a provocative new campaign that swaps all-or-nothing resolutions for something far more realistic: balance. From a bold manifesto to a full-page New York Times ad titled Quitter's Day, Ben explains why going against the seasonal grain isn't risky. It's exactly why Recess is winning. My interview with Ben is coming right up. But first,
you enjoy podcasts. We know because you're listening to one. Hi, I'm Jason Falls, the executive producer of the Marketing Podcast Network. We love podcasts too, so much so that in addition to providing you with the great episode you're listening to, we also help businesses, brands, and even individuals produce their podcasts. MPN Studios offers podcast consulting and production services to help you get you or your business its very own podcast. We've helped dozens of smart people, advertising agencies, and brands develop podcasts. All you do is record your content or interview. We take that and deliver a professionally produced audio or video episode, complete with show notes, transcriptions, and even promotional clips to use on social media. And our monthly subscription prices are hard to beat. If you or your company are jonesing to have your own podcast to establish thought leadership, drive business leads, or just have fun talking about your business or topic of choice, we'd love to help. Learn more at marketingpodcasts.net/studio. That's marketingpodcasts.net/studio.
New year, new me? Cute. But how about new year, new money? With Experian, you can actually take control of your finances. Check your FICO score, find ways to save, and get matched with credit card offers, giving you time to power through those New Year's goals you know you're going to crush. Start the year off right. Download the Experian app. Based on FICO Score 8 model. Offers and approval not guaranteed. Eligibility requirements and terms apply. Subject to credit check, which may impact your credit scores. Offers not available in all states. See Experian.com for details.
Experian.
Ben Witte, welcome to On Brand.
Great to be with you, Nick. Excited for our conversation.
I am excited to chat, and because we're talking Recess mocktail fun, I am going to open a can, which you and the team so kindly sent me. Yeah, I went with Island Spritz because I'm in cold Iowa, and we're going to go with some manifesting. Here we go. For all the audiophiles out there. So you have been turning a lot of heads with this new campaign because, again, Dry January is kind of like the Super Bowl for NA mocktail brands, and you've decided to kind of zig where others are zagging. Talk us through this bold move.
Yeah. Well, it starts with, basically an observation from, our consumer, the Recess consumer base, that kind of led to me saying for the past, 5 years or so that, I don't like this term sober curious, because I think while there are more people that are not drinking at all, the much bigger trend is moderation, not elimination. And I think for a vast majority of people are drinking fewer drinks per week and fewer drinks per night. And oftentimes shifting off between alcohol and non-alc drinks within the same night, right? So as a result of that, I don't think the term sober curious is actually appropriate and is reflective of the major trend that's driven this whole conversation on like the death of alcohol, that's been in the news over the past couple of years, which I think is dramatically overstated. I think there's a reduction in the consumption of alcohol, and people are moderating their consumption and, like I said, drinking fewer drinks per week and fewer drinks per night. And that's a huge shift for the alcohol industry, right? But I think the idea that everyone is going to be sober and stop drinking entirely is not reflective of reality. And so that, I'd say, insight and observation about the actual trend that was going on here led to a lot of, our product positioning and kind of brand architecture. So, with our, mocktail line, Recess mocktail line that we launched in 2023, which consists of, a non-alcoholic margarita, Paloma, tropical spritz, Cosmo, Moscow Mule, Mojito. The premise is tastes like your favorite cocktail without the alcohol, and enhanced with functional ingredients that can deliver kind of a balanced buzz or a relaxing effect. Some of the good parts of the feeling that alcohol can deliver without the downsides. We use taglines like craft mocktails for alcohol-free moments, a drink for when you don't want one, a mocktail in between your cocktails, right? And then, from where we showed up, like we would activate at music festivals and concert venues and, bars, right? Places where alcohol is being served. And oftentimes people just want, a drink in between drinks. And so that has, been how we've been positioning the brand and, viewing the actual consumer trends and, consumption and lifestyle habits, which are shifting, consumption of alcohol. And so when it came to dry January, this year's dry January, and especially because I think we've seen the rise of the rise of alcohol moderation really grow dramatically over the past few years. Given that, I think the need for dry January is actually less, right? If people are overall moderating their consumption of alcohol, then the need to take a month off, really, I think is less necessary. And so, that's some of the background that led us to, this campaign, which I can speak about next, but I figured I'd kind of start with kind of where we came from and kind of the observations, that led to our strategy.
Well, it seems like it's very much an idea of the time. I was just seeing that there was an opinion piece, I believe, in Time magazine from Ezekiel Emanuel talking about the same things that you're saying, but rather than this almost stunt of dry January, looking at something deeper in terms of the behavior behind a lot of this. So I would like to hear about the campaign because it's an interesting intersection of human behavior, health, and you talking about consumer behavior and marketing as well.
Yeah. So what led to the campaign, I think big part of my marketing philosophy, I think, is one, really hone in on the consumer insight, right? Which I think I just talked about, which again, I think is reflective of reality. And I think oftentimes I find the conventional wisdom, in the news and in trend pieces, to be wrong, right? There's so many times in the recess story where we bucked a trend of how everyone else was thinking about it. And I think it was accurate. And I think this is, probably our next bet there, right? That the actual trend here is moderation. But my other view is do the unexpected, try and zig where others are zagging and do something that can kind of break through. And if you think about it, basically every, alcohol alternative brand, whether it's non-alc beer or mocktails or non-alc wine, they're all saying the same message during dry January, which is drink me instead of alcohol this month. And then, start drinking again, the next month, go back to your normal, consumption behaviors. And, and the other thing with dry January is it's a New Year's resolution, right? It's now become the most marquee New Year's resolution, which is how you kind of start your year. And most New Year's resolutions for people, they break them, right? So most of the people that say they're going to do dry January don't actually complete it. There's a lot of data that supports that. So we wanted to come out with a campaign that's kind of anti perfectionism, and that, and that was really, again, set to kind of anchor the Recess brand further as this kind of moderation brand that can kind of coexist, with alcohol, right? Whether that's in the same night or on the same shelf or in the same, retailer or bar. And also position us as we're one of you, not above you. I do find a lot of these brands to be a little bit holier than thou. And I think, we're not doing that with this. And so I think people feel seen by the brand. And so, it's a little bit of the thinking.
Well, people don't want to feel bad about themselves. And I think that that's important. On the other hand, you've talked a lot about moderation. And I have to imagine that around the brainstorming table or Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
that folks were thinking, moderation, isn't a really sexy word in marketing. Did you set about to reclaim it or reframe it?
I think moderation is a word that's very top of mind right now, even like from a political standpoint, right? I think we have I think we live in, extreme technological change, extreme politics. I think people want moderation, and it increasingly doesn't exist in an increasingly polarized world. And so, one of our taglines with Recess is an antidote to modern times. I mean, the entire premise of the company that when I came up with the idea in 2017 was that we were living through, this new period in history driven by technology and was going to leave everyone stressed out and anxious. And as a result, they would be kind of prioritizing their mental wellness and looking for healthier ways to reduce stress and relax, especially as compared to alcohol. And so it was in part the whole premise of the company was a bet on extreme change, extreme politics, and the desire for people to seek out healthier ways to deal with the crazy world around them, and essentially seek moderation, seek balance, seek equilibrium, seek calm, right? And so yeah. And again, it's an important word. It's not the only word in the campaign, but I do think it's a word that's top of mind for a lot of people right now, in a way that's connected to the broader times that we're living through.
So, another thing when you talk about the NA mocktail space, it's really built on the idea, like you mentioned, whether it's New Year's or even beyond that, kind of rules and streaks. What's the downside to that mindset?
I don't think it's reflective of reality and people's actions. It is one. I think this is we're meeting people where they are, which is, I do think alcohol and going out and socializing, whether it's at, again, a friend's house and dinner party and you want to have a glass of wine or two, or meeting friends at a bar for a drink. I do think alcohol serves an important purpose in people's lives, right? And it does act as a constructive social lubricant. And I think to deny that is misguided. And I think, people talk a lot about the, the Gen Z loneliness epidemic. Well, they're probably not socializing enough. Right. And I think alcohol can play a role in that. And so I think what we're saying is what everyone's ultimately, striving for is to be, again, in control, calm, mentally sharp, confident, right? And I think that requires, adding new types of products and ingredients to your life and reducing.
On Brand will be right back after this.
Marketers, Deborah Eckerling here.
And I'm Keith Smith, and we host the MPN Meta Marketing Show, which is not just another marketing podcast, but the marketing podcast about all the other marketing podcasts.
Podcasts are booming, right? We love them, and people actually listen. They don't scroll, they don't swipe, well, except maybe during the ad breaks.
But here's the secret. With the Marketing Podcast Network, your ads don't make people hit skip. We put your brand on shows that people actually want to hear.
That's right. We match your message with podcasts that make marketing nerds like us perk up and take notes, or at least nod knowingly, pretending they understand.
And don't worry, because we'll deliver your ad naturally. People might even think that we love your brand personally, which of course we totally do, unless it's a veggie smoothie, then maybe not.
If you want your brand heard without making listeners roll their eyes,
head to marketingpodcasts.net and catch marketing fans at work, rest and play. Seriously, your audience is already listening. Make sure they hear your brand and not our awkward jokes.
Join the conversation, because good ads shouldn't just be tolerated, they should be enjoyed.
Yes!
Rinse knows that greatness takes time, but so does laundry. So Rinse will take your laundry and hand deliver it to your door expertly cleaned. And you can take the time pursuing your passions. Time once spent sorting and waiting, folding and queuing, now spent challenging and innovating and pushing your way to greatness. So pick up the Irish flute or those calligraphy pens or that daunting beef Wellington recipe card and leave the laundry to us. Rinse. It's time to be great.
Now, back to the show. But talking about looking for new products and social connection, it made me realize that long ago, I've long since quit, but I used to smoke.
Mm-hmm.
And early on, the idea of taking smoke breaks and beyond, hey, smoking's great fun or anything like that. What I look back on is the social connection of it. And then you have to, I was talking with my wife about, remember when when we did theater in college and you'd go out on breaks. And like you mentioned, you need something to replace it with. And where Memories of Nick Smoking is going is the other thing that I think you've done in working to fill the space for people looking to replace the social connection with drinking is in the brand name as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring this up because I mentioned at the top of the show that I'll ask you later when we wrap up for a brand that's made you smile. And that was actually the first place that I heard of Recess. Rob Meyerson wrote a book called Brand Naming. So a brand naming expert brought this up, and it was for that reason, because he thought this idea of Recess, of pairing it with kind of something that we all think of as, hey, we know what it means as kids, and for a grown-up, it means you're kind of getting to relive a little bit of that. You mentioned a bit about kind of the behavior trends that led you to starting the brand. Wonder on the naming and branding, because I think that's something else that you've really zeroed in on, something that seems to connect with people.
Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that. Look, the second part of the insight that led to me starting Recess beyond, the bet that we were going to be living through crazy times, and in crazy times, people would be, again, prioritizing their mental wellness and looking for healthier ways to reduce stress and relax, was the observation that there was this new class of functional ingredients emerging, such as at the time CBD oil, adaptogenic herbs, magnesium, nootropics, even THC. And again, the real light bulb moment was observing that those ingredients starting to come up in supplement form at the time, and basically taking the view that the connection between all of them, whether it's magnesium to THC, was relaxation. So I looked at them as like the equivalent of like caffeine in energy drinks or coffee that deliver a proposition of stimulation, and alcohol in alcohol, right? Those are the other two categories of products that exist to deliver a feeling, right? And my thesis was that the emergence in the very, very early stages of those ingredients really represented consumers' desire to relax. And that my bet was that what I was going to go do was package them up together into formulations across a variety of formats and create a brand around it to deliver and establish a new set of usage occasions around relaxation. So the most important brand architecture choice was the view that I was building Red Bull for relaxation, right? Mm-hmm. And if you think about the Red Bull marketing strategy, they weren't marketing caffeine and taurine. They were marketing Red Bull gives you wings, and they created an entire kind of lifestyle brand and brand world around the beverage to establish and create the association with having a Red Bull and getting stimulated. And when we launched, and so that went from, I wanted to create a brand that marketed the solution and not the ingredient, that focused on establishing these new set of usage occasions, right, for this idea for taking a break, taking a moment to relax and chill, right? That was not something that anyone was thinking about at the time, or seeking out a brand to do that. They were looking to chill in other ways. And so, I look at, I'm a big believer in narrative-driven brands, right? The Recess narrative story from day one is an antidote to modern times. Take a recess so they can feel calm, cool, collected. That's been the tagline from the beginning. And we built an entire platform that's connected under that idea. And so yeah, and then I think that's a lot of the key thinking that kind of went into the philosophy of the brand, architecture and name and narrative.
Well, I think it's a great answer because it's not just, I know I zeroed in on the name, but it's really, like you said, a bigger platform and idea structure for taking people through this experience as well. You've grown to become a leader in this space. And one of the challenges of leadership is, kind of coming full circle back to something like Dry January and saying, you know what, everybody's doing this. It's as a leader, it's can be pretty scary to, okay, you know what, we're not going to do that, and or do that in the same way, or observe this. So how do you know when it's time as a leader in a new and emerging, not new, but definitely a growing high growth space, um when you know it's time to push on the status quo a little bit?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I just am one of my, I kind of came from Silicon Valley. I didn't come from the CPG industry. And I was a big, one of my beliefs is just the conventional wisdom is often just so wrong. And that the best ideas are just secrets hidden in plain sight. Right. And there's so many times along the recess journey where, lots of people are telling me you're a CBD beverage brand. Why aren't you marketing CBD in the early days? Right. I'm like, I've never heard anyone call Red Bull a caffeine company. Or they would call this the CBD beverage category. I'm like, all I'm seeing the consumer, and this like in 2018, 2019, when we launched, now our original CBD line is like 1% of our sales. But I'm like, all consumers are talking about how this helps them relax and replace a glass of wine in the evening and chilling. They're not even talking about the functional ingredients, right? And then when I bet on magnesium, which was an incredible bet, we really catalyzed the magnesium space, like that was a secret hidden in plain sight that no one was talking about. And like, I think this is just obviously this is, a similar bet, which is like the big trend here is moderation, right? I'm not saying that there's not a growing number of people that are sober, and they're a big part of our customer base. And we're not like saying anything's wrong with that. We just think the bigger market that a majority of people are transitioning to, and that actually can make a huge impact in the quality of life of people and the world, is just moderating, right? Like, I think that's a huge, if people are less hungover and more in control and don't do as dumb stuff when they're drunk, like that's a huge positive impact on the world, right? And so trying to get everyone to go sober, I feel like is probably a stretch. And again, we're not saying anything's wrong with that. We support that. And, many of our, customer base, is sober, and we cater to them, but we want to be an inclusive brand to as many people as possible.
Because it's certainly a part of it, but you're really looking for the bigger conversation. And I loved your way into that of the conventional wisdom, whether it's you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to call it a CBD drink. And I think Red Bull is a great example. And it almost sounds like that's kind of been a touchstone for you
Yes.
along the way too. And I find that really useful in building a brand, even if to take something and say, what if we were the
Yes.
Red Bull of this space? And it really identifies and clarifies probably a lot when it comes to your strategy as well.
Absolutely.
So as you are looking ahead, you've talked a lot about, seeing kind of the behavior and where that might be going, and people needing to take care of themselves. You talked about the big bet on magnesium, and now with the kind of redefining, recalibrating around Dry January. Where do you see things going when it comes to the space and your brand?
Look, I think the alcohol for our I've defined the space as the relaxation space. Like the usage occasion for recess as an alcohol alternative is only one of the usage occasions, right? It's probably the largest, but it's certainly not the only. Many people would drink like a recess mood or magnesium-based product line, in the afternoon, like instead of a second or third cup of coffee, to get to kind of focus and to reset, to kind of get into a flow state while working. A lot of people will drink it, with lunch or, before bed, right? We have powders. A lot of people will actually take those in the morning to kind of start their day calm. And so I think another key insight we had, which is that I think the trend of, alcohol moderation is, and a desire to improve sleep and like the rise of sleep supplements and stress relief supplements are actually all connected and are really downstream from a consumer's focus on mental well-being, right? And they're making a large number of kind of diet and lifestyle changes to ultimately feel, again, more calm, more balanced, more in control. And as a result, kind of more, productive and, happy in their, personal lives. And so we are a brand that's fascinating because we can sell in a yoga and meditation studio and in a nightclub. We can be in the sleep supplement aisle with a recess sleep gummy, you could imagine, and in the alcohol aisle with a mocktail, and they're all connected, right? Because the brand narrative and the brand architecture is in such a way where it kind of makes sense, right? And it's because I've been very consistent with like my view of what was happening here and the structure of the space that was going to emerge over, a long period of time. And so, yeah, I think I look at the framing of the broad space as where I had this view of like, if the past 30 years saw the rise of stimulation, the next 30 years would see the rise of relaxation, right? That was my thesis in like 2017. Just turns out that Monster Energy and, Red Bull are $70 billion companies, and Monster Energy was one of the best performing stock of, from 2000 to 2020. But I think this, like the relaxation space is about 5 to 6 years old, and I think it's going to compound forever. There's just no scenario I can think of where people are going to be less stressed out in the future than they are today, right? For better or worse. And so I think, again, we're still in the relatively early stages of this space's emergence, but I think it's just becoming more, mainstream, and these are becoming, real dedicated categories at retail. And again, I think there's a tremendous amount of room for, to go from here.
Well, you have made me smile many times throughout our conversation. I mentioned Rob Meyerson's smile that was the Recess brand itself. Now it is my opportunity to get to ask you, Ben, for a brand that has made you smile recently.
A campaign I liked was over Thanksgiving, Tito's did. It was about instead of the turkey trot, it was the turkey rot, the Tito's turkey rot around like rotting on your couch, I think, with a cocktail. I thought that was a good play on obviously the opposite. So that made me smile. I thought that was and again, I think it was like taking this cultural moment and like inverting it. I think as a way like breaking through. And I'm a big believer in like social commentary. Like I would describe the Recess brand voice, like especially the Instagram in the early days, as like a social commentary on the millennial Gen Z existence, kind of speaking to the crazy times that we're living through in like a tongue-in-cheek way. And so anyways, I like kind of brands that kind of play on like a cultural moment and like invert it and take a different angle to it. So I thought that was a cool campaign.
Awesome. Well, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Well, the Recess website is takearecess.com, or you can find us on Amazon. We have a big Amazon presence. And then in retailers like Target and Albertsons Safeway and Kroger and Trader Joe's and many more to come, hopefully. And then for me, probably Twitter or LinkedIn. I think my Twitter is x.com now /bwitte, BWITTE, or search me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can always find at onbrandpodcast.com. Ben Witte, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thanks, Nick. It was great. Great conversation. Appreciate you having me on.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.